one pianist perhaps to come up and say to me, I know how you got through that, or, middle of the César Franck or something like that, say, I know what that feels like. Right. I think it's its own reward, to be honest. Right. And pianists are pianists, singers are singers, and it would be a pity if they tried to, to ape each other. I think it's different worlds, but they do blend at a certain point. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of fascination to watching a singer in action.
So is it very different to accompany, for example, classical pieces as opposed to more pop type music? Is there a huge difference between the two genres of music for an accompanist?
Personally, I don't think so, though in the pop sphere often you will not get such harmonic complexity.
Right.
And there is possibly more room for improvisation as well within the accompaniment, whereas with the classical it's been a prescribed part.
Right.
You might mess about with it nevertheless, but very discreetly, whereas with a pop score you might be remaking it as you're playing it.
Right, and making it your own piece of music.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to learn to play the piano, to be a soloist, but it really is a completely different thing to learn to be an accompanist, a good accompanist.
Yes, I think because you're editing, mixing, arranging as you go, but you have to be seen to be not doing that, so it must be discreet. So a lot depends on the performance you've got while you're in it, or how much support your singer might be needing from you or not needing from you right at that moment. So I think there's a lot of instinct comes into play to do with the balance of the piano against the voice. And the balance depends on the timbre of the voice that you're working with, whether you've got, whether you've got a male voice or a female voice. Obviously, with a strong male voice, you would be adding more treble into the mix,
right,
and vice versa with a female voice, but not with a female voice, not to be preemptive with the bass and not bring out the bass ahead of time. It always has to be sort of slipped into the mix underneath the voice, and that at least that's how I see it,
right,
and not ahead of time. And I think if you're hearing a bit of accompaniment that isn't working, it'll be because the accompanist is not putting in the bass at the right level or in the right place. So you've got both of those issues to think about.
So another question I wanted to ask you just briefly is, I'm thinking you probably don't always get a chance to actually have a rehearsal period with a singer.
Or not for very long.
Right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's another challenge to overcome if
Very
you're singing with somebody you've never performed with before.
Yes. I think when that happens, or when I've got very little time to warm up with somebody, what I do is try and make a very quick assessment of what sort of performer they are, what sort of personality they are. Whether they're going to be really out in front or whether they're going to want somebody supporting them and leading them. And again, that's very interesting because that's a bit of psychology, or you can go by hearsay or by reputation as well.
Right.
And all singers are different, and that's very interesting to me.
Okay, so now we're going to just have a listen to what happens for the singer when the piano is being banged.
Well, I think that I know what you're talking about with a banging piano. You know, piano is quite a banging instrument. It's a percussive instrument.
Right.
If you're not very, very careful, especially in romantic music, if you're not very careful with how you're using your hands, how you're using the pedal, and how you're listening, you will hear this kind of there's booming and a sort of smacking sound coming off the piano, and it must be quite disconcerting for a singer in front of that.
Yes, it is. It's very distracting, and it does feel like you're being smacked around the head a bit, especially if there's a really banging bass going on, which sometimes you hear in professional performances.
Oh yes, you do. You do. And I think I know why that is, because over the years, singers have said to pianists, you know, I want support, so give me, you know, support. And pianists read that the support is coming from the chords in the bass or in the bottom of the piano. And sometimes they think that more is required than is actually required. And that's a case of not using instinct properly, I'm guessing.
Or perhaps going against their instinct and listening to a singer who knows nothing about the piano.
Or has misused the word support.
Yes.
You know, cultural differences about what support really means. I think that some pianists think that support means leading.
Ah.
And that's a disaster, I think.
Absolutely.
For singers.
Yes,
if
because
they've got a pianist who knows better and is going to tell them what pace to start at, when to move on,
yes,
when to pull back. It's all hilarious. I mean, it all happens. I've never, I've seen every eventuality in that respect, and it is hilarious.
What does it take to be able to play in a very legato way? I'm sure it's a combination of using your hands differently, of thinking differently, of working with the singer in a different way.
Yes. Well, there are various types of techniques, and all those pianists out there will know what they are. But there's a kind of finger technique or forearm technique that produces the bang. As does the odd upright piano, and you get a marriage of those elements. You get a very percussive sound, just to be on the kind side. And then, if you get a very good grand piano played without this forearm banging, just using the shoulders, everything from on the key, so stroking the key from on the key, so the pianist is not losing contact between the shoulder and the key.
Right.
That can produce a very nice warm legato sound which singers like to live in.
It's more comfortable for us because it feels as though it gives me an opportunity to be more creative within the piece, especially with classical music, because they are very often more difficult to be very free and express more of what you want to do. I mean, it's very sort of, these are the times, this is what you've got to do.
Yes.
And very often you're working with a style, a certain style, which requires a specific way of singing, and you can't really come out of that.
Yes. I think the best way I could put it sort of technically for a pianist is that the entries into the phrase and out of the phrase should be as quiet as possible.
Right.
So you shouldn't hear a sort of preemptive banging coming, you know, either just before you enter or just after.
Right.
Now that's the essence of what accompaniment is all about.
Okay.
And some pianos make it easier than others to operate, but ideally you should be coming in softly, like a little footstep, just underneath the vocal line all the time, and coming out in the same way.
Right.
So you get what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And that makes for a much easier way of singing. And also it makes the singer feel like they are in control of the piece.
Yes.
It makes the singer feel safe, actually.
Absolutely, yes. And that's what I would say support really is.
Right, I agree with you.
And that is probably the essence of also what is difficult when you are an accompanist. You have to be in that little zone where you're timing yourself absolutely with the singer and not trying to lead. So you're not neither trying to lead nor really trying to follow. You're trying to come underneath. I do think that when you've worked as an accompanist for a while and you sort of soloing as well, what happens is that all that information, all that experience that you've built up as an accompanist starts to inform the solo work. For me, when I play solo now, I'm much more relaxed than I used to be. I'm much more trusting that the quieter, less foreground type of